Hello and welcome to a new feature, the Decision Making Debrief, real-life, real-time flying examples. And today we're going to talk about that pernicious threat to aviation, press-on-itis or get there-itis. And I'll share an example of a time when I let the urge to get there cloud my judgment. So, press-on-itis is the subconscious human factor that results in us sometimes taking unnecessary risks or making bad decisions because we really want to get there or we have a strong desire to complete the mission. Despite all the clues and cues, we convince ourselves that we can carry on as planned. So I have an example of press-on-itis that I wanted to share with you today. It was on a flight with the family down to Dinard in France in the summer of 2022. We'd really been looking forward to it. We'd booked expensive hotel rooms and it was probably the first proper family holiday since the COVID pandemic. And so the pressure was on. If we didn't get there, we'd lose a lot of money. I was concerned that I'd disappoint the family. And on top of this, there was the issue of self-pride, my own internal desire to complete the mission successfully. None of this would have been a problem had I stopped to recognise these pressures and how they might affect my decision making and then come up with a plan to mitigate this. But there was no stop and think moment about the threats and errors present on this flight. That's because I'd been so consumed with getting the family ready for the trip, packing the suitcases, booking taxis, PPR, customs, GAR forms, flight plans, and so on. We departed Lyon-Solent and headed to Cherbourg to clear customs. This was already a change to my original plan because my home base at Redhill and Le Touquet, where I'd planned to clear customs, were IFR. It was plain sailing to Cherbourg, but the weather forecast for the rest of the route was marginal, to say the least. Here's the Met Office chart for midday that day, showing that my route was going to cross a cold front as I tracked south from Cherbourg, with a southwesterly tropical maritime air mass behind it. The Cherbourg TAF was fine for the time of the flight. The TAF I'd consulted for Jersey, though, off to the southwest, predicted clouds, few at 500 feet, broken at 2,500 feet, but with a Prob 30 tempo between 0900 and 1200 hours, clouds broken at 500 feet. Dinard itself was predicting to be VFR. Since I was going to be taking off from Cherbourg at midday, I figured that I should be able to land at Dinard okay, and that there was only a small probability of clouds down to 500 feet en route, so small, a Prob 30, that I almost discounted it. The fine weather at Cherbourg added to the full sense of security, and the latest TAFs boosted my hopes as well. The forecast weather at Dinard and Jersey were now more optimistic than the earlier ones, with that broken at 500 now few at 800. I could manage that, or so I thought. I taxied out from Cherbourg and had a plog in front of me which included minimum safe altitudes, and I decided that if clouds did start to drop over the land, I'd head west out to the coast and track low level over the sea. I took off, telling myself that I wouldn't descend below 1,000 feet.
So now you can see what I mean by the weather gets worse down here. Yeah.
Not long after setting course to Dinard, the clouds did start to drop, and so I initiated my plan B and headed west to track low level over the sea. All was going swimmingly until the clouds dropped still further, broken at 900, 800, 700. I'd gone way below my 1,000 foot minima over the sea and was scud running at just above legal height. It was uncomfortable, stressful, and I knew that at some point I'd have to cross land again to make my approach to Dinard. I thought that would be fine because the TAF had told me so. Actually, Dinard was fine, but the area to the east of Dinard was not. It was covered in low cloud. Thankfully, the clouds were high enough for me to legally make my way to Dinard, but I was having to weave around towns, airspace restrictions, terrain and obstacles at low level. It was not fun at all. We had a lovely holiday in Dinard, but my flight down had demonstrated poor decision making. So what is my takeaway from all of this? I think this was a classic case of press-on-itis. Failing to reach Dinard was almost not an option for me, when it should have been my default position. My family would have understood had we arrived day late, or even not made it at all, the money we'd have lost was insignificant in the grand scheme of things. There were clues in the charts and forecasts, but rather than read them objectively, I read what I wanted to see. I knew that there was a risk of low cloud, evident from my plan B to fly low level down the coastline, but was that really the safest option? Not at all. My plan B should have been to turn back to the Cabo-K skies behind me, overnight at Cherbourg, and try for Dinard the following morning. The next free safety workshop from Astral Aviation Consulting is on the subject of defensive flying. It'll be on Wednesday the 24th of April at 19:30 British Summer Time. To join us, register for free at astralaviationconsulting.com. And if you like this debrief, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We'll be back next month with the next in the series.